Hello, people of the Most High. How are you all doing this evening? Thank you for all who are joining me this afternoon. I trust that you are well and blessed, that your families are doing well. Hopefully, you're all doing okay. So, welcome to all of you, to our new and returning viewers, those of you who are here almost every single live. I appreciate you. Thank the Most High for you. May his blessings rest upon you and yours. We have several folks joining us this afternoon. So I'm going to say some quick hellos because boy, do I have a lot to cover tonight. I mean, really, I know I say that all the time, right? But I do. So good evening, Brother Dwayne, Clifford, Rachel, Ashaka. Greetings to you. Well, welcome to the channel. Hadassah, B. Smith, These Eye Views, Brother Darnell, Patricia, Mariah, Vanessa. Who else do we have? Idris. I hope I got that right. How are you, Sister Cece? Malaka, how are you doing? Nicole, how are you, sis? Shelly, Shaya, Kenneth, Carmen, Marilyn, Yabu. I said Karen, I believe. Let's see. Terry, Council's girl. Okay, Romy, how are you? Eliyahu, Percy, Yo Bop. Chine Moss, M.R. New Grew, Yvonne, D. Wimberly, Brother Harold, how are you? Alma, how are you doing? Deborah, Celicia, Tweety, Zion, Angela, Kimbler. Oh my, so much media. All right now. Diane, how are you? Let's see. All of our moderators, welcome and thank you again for all that you do. Inspired Identity, Miriam, be consecrated for Yahweh. Yes, we all need to be, right? How are you, Queen Mommy? S. Harrison, well, Bryant, Tyrone, Jay. Yes, it's a lot of you. So I'm going to go ahead and get into this because, as I said, there is a lot to cover. We are still in the series Time for the Nations to Reap, and we have come to the last part on Portugal. After this session tonight, we'll be ready to move on to the next session or the next nation on the list, and that's going to be Great Britain. So, as I mentioned in the last live session, I needed to spend some time on Portugal because it is the nation that got things started with the transatlantic, or should we say European slave trade. And I've kind of tied in Spain and Portugal in some of this because a lot of it, the persecutions began in Spain and then followed them into Portugal. But when you understand what happened or what was set in place in Portugal, you'll understand how things progressed from there. And Spain and Portugal both, I would say, served as the foundation from a religious and governmental standpoint for the things that would come later. So keep in mind that the atrocities began in Spain. And it began when our people were forced to convert. And they were trying to keep them in line after they converted, after they were baptized. When they wanted to keep them in line, and things just escalated from there because they began implementing laws and making decrees to force them to comply with the Christian religion, or the dogma, I should say. And it resulted in people being forced into slavery or expelled out of the country. And many of them fled into Africa and other nations. So we definitely want to talk about these things to help us to understand what happened, how they erased the evidence so that we were erased from history to the point that we didn't even recognize ourselves. We didn't know. We didn't know why we were going through all the stuff we were going through. So these things help to explain it. And you're going to see that they worked very, very hard to erase the evidence. But the cat's out of the bag, wouldn't you say? They can't erase this anymore because the truth is there. We've had to do a lot of digging, and not just me. We've been doing a lot of digging, sharing information, etc., so that we have a more complete picture of what happened with our people. But let's talk about this, how they took our heritage and wealth and how they tried to erase us. And this is a fulfillment of prophecy. We see here Psalm 83:4. They have said, "Come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more." There was a confederation of nations that came together, and they said they would come into agreement. They would work together to cut us off from being a nation. They hated us so much that they didn't even want the name. They didn't want the name of Yasharel to be remembered. It's like, get rid of them at all costs. So yes, we're unraveling some of these things to see what has happened. And I tell you, as we learn this information, as more and more things are coming to light, you all, there is just no doubt. There should be no doubt about who the true people are. This is another passage that I want to share, Jeremiah 17:1-4. It says, "The sin of Judah." Now note that this is specific to Judah. "The sin of Judah is written with a pen of iron." That means there's no turning back from this. These things must happen. "With the point of a diamond, it is engraved on the tablet of their heart and on the horns of your altars. While their children remember their altars and their wooden images by the green trees on the high hills. O my mountain in the field, I will give as plunder your wealth." The Most High is saying, "I will give as plunder your wealth, all your treasures, and your high places of sin within all your borders. And you even yourself shall let go of your heritage, which I gave you. And I will cause you to serve your enemies in the land which you do not know. For you have kindled a fire in my anger, which shall burn forever." Now, I just have to put this little caveat out there. For those who say this is the land, America is the land, the promised land, how is this saying it would be in a land that you do not know? Just asking. All right, let's get going, family, because as I said, I have a lot to get through tonight. All right, so we established the fact that the people being referred to as Jews in Spain and Portugal were dark melanated people. And we're not talking about, quote unquote, the olive color, unless you're talking about black olives. So I will reference the two sources again that I shared. And this comes from a book written by James Pritchard called Natural History of Man. And we see here on page 132, that it says, "The Jews of Portugal are very dark." The Jews of Portugal are very dark. They're being clear here. They're very dark. All right. The other source that I shared came from a book called History of the Pentateuch on page 118. Listen to what it says. It says the black color is found not only in individuals as the Black Jews of Portugal, but in the tribes as the Vicaris on the Red Sea. And you can see, based on the picture, those people look nothing like the ones who say they are us. So I just wanted to make sure that we are all on the same page regarding what they looked like. To be clear, we are talking about descendants of the house of Yehuda or Judah, the Yehudis. The world refers to them as Jews. So I will read the passages as it is for clarity. So hopefully we're all clear on that point. And now we're going to do a recap about how the church and state worked together in Spain and Portugal to force our ancestors into the Christian religion and separate them from their heritage and their wealth. And then we're going to talk about how they tried to erase the evidence. And you all, I think they thought they did a good job. I really believe that they thought that there is no way these people will ever figure out who they are. They don't know the Most High very well, do they? But they thought they had it all wrapped up. So we're going to be using this book. I'm going to use several sources tonight, but this book called The Jews in Spain of Portugal and the Inquisition. Now, this was written in 1877. So I'm going to cover some things or highlight some things from this text. So, you all, I hope you're ready, because again, there is a lot to cover. It says the following little sketch was originally composed as a lecture to some Jewish working men at the East End of London. The subject is, to me, naturally an interesting one, no less from a national than from a family point of view. So this writer is giving us the back end, telling us the background, I should say, of how this book came to be. He says the position of the Jews in Spain and Portugal during a great part of the Middle Ages forms an exceptionally bright spot in their dark and checkered history, and develops some striking intellectual and moral features in an age when a great part of what now constitutes civilization was wrapped in mental darkness. The favored position of the Jews in the peninsula induced a vast Hebrew population to settle there. And although it became evident after a time that their prosperity, attracting as it did the jealousy of the bulk of people, would lead to their ultimate ruin. This could only be effected in a long and gradual manner, and could only be consummated by a cruel and violent measure, their forced expulsion. Now, I hope you caught that. It was their prosperity that made the other nations jealous, and it led to their ultimate ruin. Now, we know that it was a bit more than that, but we'll keep going. So, it says, the persecutions became so frequent and so violent that large numbers of Jews from southern Spain sought refuge on the African coast. Let's just pause there. Why would they seek refuge on the African coast, family? The African coast? Would pale people, pale skin, just want to go to this hot climate? The African coast, why would they want to go there? And think about when this happened. So we're not talking about air conditioners being there, you know. Why would they want to go to the African coast? They went to regions where the people looked like them. And that would confirm what we saw in the picture that I showed you, the people that they call the Bakaris people. So it says, they sought refuge on the African coast, and a good understanding arose between them and the Moors, which the latter used to their advantage, when a little later they crossed the straits and invaded the peninsula. Let's keep going. So it says, unfortunately, at the time of the expulsion, there was a plague going on in Castile. And they blamed our people, basically saying it was the fugitives. They brought with them the disease and spreading it wherever they went. So it caused people to loathe them and hate them even more, to attack them even more. So this circumstance induced King John to hasten their departure from Portugal, for which purpose ships were duly provided according to the agreement. But such was the temper of the captains and sailors that they subjected the Jews to the hardest possible conditions. They plundered them of their goods and valuables, even to their very clothes, and landing them naked and bare of everything on barren points of the African coast. So some of them went to the African coast on their own, and we see these being kicked out and expelled and dropped off on the African coast, leaving them to die of starvation or to be sold into slavery to the Moors. Now, how interesting is that? That twice now we're seeing that they were taken into Africa or went into Africa. It says, nor was this all. The king wrested or took from the parents all the children between the ages of 3 and 10 of those Jewish immigrants who from poverty or otherwise had omitted to pay the capitation tax on entering, or who were forced to remain in Portugal, and had them transported to the newly discovered islands of St. Thomas, talking about another area where Black people are, which then swarmed with alligators and other beasts of prey, to be brought up as Christians. Interesting, right? 600 of the richest families of the Spanish Jews, however, had by a separate transaction procured for themselves the right of remaining in Portugal on payment of 60,000 gold cruzados, and a few useful mechanics were also exempted from the action of the general decree. So we see that they allowed some to remain. All right. So it says, resistance was, however, not to be tolerated, and it was therefore decreed that the same fate was to be meted out to the adults and to the aged as had already been the portion of the younger members of the race of Israel. So remember, they had already sent a lot of the children away. They were sold into slavery. So amid the most heart-rending cries and the most determined resistance, men and women in the flower of their days, or the decrepitude of age, were dragged into the churches and forcibly baptized amid the mocking and exultation of the excited populace. So they could not resist. So there was a time when they had those who were converting. Many were forced, being coerced. But it says the time came when resistance was not to be tolerated. So it's like, we don't care if you're young or old. We're going to drag your behind into this church, and you are going to be baptized. Now, I had to stop and think about that, because apparently having someone dunk you in water is all it takes to become a Christian. Forget the fact that your heart has not changed. And that may explain why members of the KKK call themselves Christians, right? It doesn't matter what your heart is like. As long as you're baptized, you're good to go. You're good to go. So it says later, let me go back because I want to catch this part. It says, but 7 or 8 of the whole number of those who maintained their constancy succeeded in eluding force and managed to secure a passage where? To the coast of Africa. Why are all these pale-skinned people trying to go to Africa way back then? You know I'm being facetious. So it says, later in the year 1497 appeared an edict by which the converts from Judaism, and you all, our ancestors did not practice this religion called Judaism. We didn't have a religion. We had a way of life. We had customs, laws. We had the traditions of our ancestors. So it wasn't a religion, but that's what they call it. So it says, which the converts from Judaism were shielded from persecution for the next 20 years. So they had a reprieve, during which time every means was to be provided for instructing them in their new faith. At the end of this period, all difference between old and new Christians was to cease. Those then accused of Jewish practices were to be handed over to the civil law, and if found guilty, were to be punished with the confiscation of their property, which was to fall to the next Christian heir. So it was all about getting the money into the hands of those they deemed to be Christians. But I'm going to share some things with you later so that you can understand who's really being referenced here. All right, let's get going. All right, so I want to look at this journal article because there's so much to cover on the Inquisition. That's a series within itself, and several of our brothers and sisters have information about that on their channels where they've gone into it in depth. That's not the primary focus for this series, so I'm just highlighting some of the key things here. But now I want to talk about how the church and state work together to erase their dirty deeds, and in the process, erase our history. Because all of this led to the transatlantic or European slave trade. And it all began in Spain and Portugal. It served as the foundation for when our people would be trafficked around the world. Those things are tied to how we ended up not remembering that we are the people. Another non-melanated race of people laid claim to our heritage as a result. They erased us, or so they thought, just as the scripture said. So let's look at this journal article, and it's saying, putting the indices into practice, censoring science in early modern Portugal. All right, it says the Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese Inquisitions went to great lengths to censor printed books in the 16th and 17th centuries. The measures that they took to counter the diffusion of doctrines threatening Catholic orthodoxy included the assembly of lists of forbidden books and authors, the frequent inspection of ships, libraries, and bookshops, and the legal prosecution of transgressors. They were prosecuting people. If they had any of the books they had on a particular list saying these books are banned, these are written by heretics. But anyway, you're going to see that they went to great lengths to hide our history. It says, more generally, some historians of science have studied the overall impact of the Holy Office on the creation and circulation of scientific knowledge in early modern Europe. Now, I really need you to get what they're trying to say here. A lot of whitewashing went on. And then we have all of this information, scientific knowledge that just seemed to come out of nowhere. It was because they were taking credit for the knowledge that they had stolen from others. So they banned books, they burned books, so that the general populace wouldn't know where this information really came from. Remember who we're talking about here. So it says, on May 23rd, 1536, after an insistent request from King Gio III, Pope Paul III issued a papal bull, and he was basically approving the foundation of the Portuguese Inquisition. The crown first established courts in Lisbon and Evora in 1536, followed by courts in the cities, and it lists these different cities, Porto, Coimbra, and one in distant Goa, India. It says, between its foundation in 1536 and its abolition in 1821, the Portuguese Inquisition conducted between 45 and 50,000 formal trials and sentenced to death at least 2,000 men and women. In Portugal, the major target of the Holy Office were undisputedly Jews and New Christians, and they gave the name New Christians to our people that they had forcibly converted, or even voluntarily. They called them New Christians. They were often accused of secretly practicing Judaism, and their trials account for 80 to 95% of the total number conducted by the Inquisition in Portugal and in the overseas colonies that belonged to Portugal. I hope you're seeing this. So beginning in 1496, it says thousands of Jews and Muslims were either expelled or forcefully converted to Christianity. The persecution of the conversos, or the new converts, the new Christians, reached a critical point in what came to be known as the Lisbon Massacre of 1506, when 1,000 to 4,000 men, women, and children were brutally slaughtered in popular riots. Brutally slaughtered by Christians, you all. Let's keep going. It says the trials and auto de fe were the most visible actions of the Inquisition. But the Holy Office, speaking about the Catholic Church now, was also responsible for the censorship of books, which was to a certain degree a less noticeable procedure. Before the foundation of the Inquisition, the censorship of books was under the direct jurisdiction of local bishops. The crown, so church and state agree, undertook significant initiatives to control the diffusion of undesirable texts as well, including the royal decree ordering the burning of heretical books in 1451 and the general prohibition to print and possess Jewish books in 1497. You can figure out who they thought the heretics were, right? I'm sure you can. So it says the censors of the Inquisition were recruited from among the most learned members, listen, of the religious orders, especially the Dominicans and the Jesuits. Are we surprised that the secret societies were involved in this? It says throughout the 16th and 17th centuries, inquisitors often inspected ships, books, private and public libraries to make sure that no forbidden books were imported, sold, or read without the reader having been first granted a permit. You had to get a permit to read a book. You needed a permit to read a book, you all. First of all, it needs to be stressed that whereas censors were responsible for examining a book, either before its publication or after a denunciation, booksellers, librarians, and private owners were expected to expurgate their own book. So you had to figure out whether or not this book was banned or not, or you could face persecution. They were serious, you all. They were serious. My goodness. So listen to this from Printing History. It says, for the Spanish Catholic crown, the publication of unlicensed or subversive works had the potential to erode its sovereignty, both domestically and abroad. So you see why they're doing this. They're saying we have to protect our lies. So we can't have books out there that are saying the opposite of what we're putting out. So we need to make sure we can control what people read. The censorship extended, though, beyond Spain. Wherever they had colonies or other European nations, they were censoring this because remember, the Roman Catholic Church had its reach, its arm in all of those colonized nations. So they had to make sure they could determine what people would know. Why? The truth about the cover-up could harm all of the regions they had colonized. Let's keep going. It says the intent of the law was to prevent the dissemination of dissident ideologies. It's like we can't have you thinking any other way than what we tell you and how we tell you to think. Underscoring the political significance of the process, the decree prescribed a harsh penalty for printers or booksellers who published without a license in hand, such as death, confiscating their assets, and burning the illicit books. The order of the listed repercussions was telling. The Spanish crown was willing, please listen to this, to destroy not only the transgressors, but also their legacy and family's socioeconomic future. So look, people were not willing to take the risk. So they complied. It's like we will destroy you and everything you own if you have these books in your home, in your libraries. You need to get rid of them. I want you to see just how serious this was because they didn't want to allow anyone to disagree with their fabrications. The lie had to be set in place. It says royal officials selected from a diverse pool of intellectuals and appointing readers. So they would appoint these readers to read these books. Isn't that happening today, you all? It's happening today in libraries, in school libraries. They are going through and looking through books to see if there's information about Black history and getting rid of the books, you all. As much as things change, they remain the same. So it says royal officials selected from a diverse pool of intellectuals and appointing readers, authorities in Seville and the American capitals tended to appoint Jesuit and Augustinian priests, as well as individuals who had a master's or doctoral degree. So they wanted the high ups and those involved in the religious orders to be the readers of these books to determine whether or not the general public should have access to them. All right, let's go on. We're going to look at another excerpt from City University of New York. And it says, as we can see, printing in Spain was mainly a Christian activity. Even if the paper had been introduced to Europe by the Muslims, even though it had been introduced by them, the mobile press had its origins in Northern Europe, and the social configuration of Spain at the end 15th century did not allow for a different setting. The Jews were a minority, and the public animosity towards them was increasing. The Christians had managed to resettle in the majority of the peninsula, it's saying, after the Muslim conquest in 711. I hope you all are seeing this. And the Muslims occupied only the region of Granada, which was conquered in 1491. And you all know what happened in 1492, right? At the end of the century, the whole peninsula was under Christian rule, and so it would remain. This does not mean that Christians were the only early printers in Spain. In 1482, so it names this man, and he produced the first printed edition of the Talmud. Interesting that came out around that time. So in 1485, some other printed works came out, and it says the Talmud soon became a target of the Inquisition as well. So in 1490, the Grand Inquisitor Fray Thomas Torquemada, possibly from Jewish origin himself, it says, burned Hebrew books by order of Ferdinand and Isabella, and later conducted an auto da fe in Salmanaka, where more than 6,000 volumes were infected. So they said 6,000 volumes were infected with Jewish errors, so they were burnt. 6,000 books were infected with Jewish errors. After the decree of expulsion in 1492, all Jewish books were confiscated, and the Inquisition worked hard to find any Jewish contamination. You all, and those who converted and remained in Spain, making it almost impossible for the printing of any Hebrew material. So you see how it was so easy for them to move forward with the whitewashing and then set these other people up as being the people. They became the people because they had pretty much erased the evidence to say Oh, these are the people, and this is what they look like. These are the people, and this is what they look like. So, family, you need to understand they were serious. They were serious about erasing everything that had to do with us. Everything that had to do with us. And this is what made it possible for them to then step in and fill this void. Now you have a British crown. They set them up as the reigning power from the Davidic line, is what they say, that it was passed on to them. But this is how they did it. This is how they did it. So now we have to remember that in Germany, around 1440, is when Gutenberg invented the printing press. And this started the printing revolution. So it was easier then for them to get their message out and erase anything that had to do with us. Let's look at this next journal article. Enforcing religious repression in an age of world empires. So I'm going to read some from this. It says the Spanish and Portuguese empires created new trade routes that attracted a highly mobile merchant community, which included many descendants of Jews who had converted to Christianity and were generically known as New Christians or conversos, who were suspected of continuing to embrace Judaism. Now, again, we didn't have a religion, so they were embracing the customs of our ancestors. This mobility of individuals across oceans and territories constituted a problem for an organization whose objective was to police the circulation of religious ideas and particularly to prevent the spread of heretical beliefs from Europe to overseas colonies. So this situation was openly acknowledged by contemporaries. As early as 1508, a Castilian royal edict prohibited the immigration to the New World. You have to get this, of the descendants of Jews and Muslims burnt or reconciled by the Inquisition up to the fourth generation. I hope you caught that. They didn't allow the descendants of those who had been burnt or reconciled to go to the New World up to the fourth generation. This tells us that they kept a record of the genealogies. How else would they know that a person was related to someone who had been burnt or reconciled? And let's make sure we understand what it means when it says those who are reconciled. So when they convicted someone of heresy, they would confiscate the person's assets and possibly send them into exile. They could also imprison the person or sentence them to death or burning by death if it was someone who refused to submit. So the Inquisition's job or goal was to get the person to admit their guilt in order to receive forgiveness and then be reconciled with the church. But look at what they're saying here. For someone like that, they did not want that person's descendants to go to the New World up to 4 generations. Why? By that time, the memory of what happened would have been erased. The lengths that they went to is mind-boggling. I mean, they were serious. When you think about They kept track up to 4 generations to make sure that person's ancestors or descendants, I'm sorry, did not go to the New World. So this comes from this is from the University of Valencia, from Valencia, Spain. So it says, since the 19th century, conversos, again, speaking of our people, who have been among the most prolific lines of research for medievalists and early modern historians. So it says the persecution they suffered at the hands of the Inquisition, the veracity of the claims that attributed to them a clear tendency to remain Jewish in secret long after they were baptized, and their role as cultural agents and active contributors to Spanish culture, particularly in the field of literature, have appealed greatly to researchers. However, in contrast to the vast amount of academic research focusing on Jews from a social perspective, our knowledge of the first generations of conversos is limited. Now, why do you think that is? Why would the information on them be limited? You'll see. When studying conversos from extensive archival documentation, it is crucial to distinguish them from the rest of the population. However, identifying newly converted individuals in notarial records, even the first generation, is a challenging endeavor, because immediately after the summer of 1391, a scribal practice unusual prior to that date became widespread in the Crown of Aragon. Listen to what they did. It involved adding, immediately after the name of the converted individuals, the Latin adjectives, basically meaning someone who was reborn or converted. And it meant this is a new Christian. So they added that after the name of the person. It says there is no general agreement about the reasons behind this explicit identification of former Jews, but discrimination. Yeah, it was so they could track them. It says the most obvious purpose may have not been the only reason. Newly converted Jews not only, switched religions after their conversion, but their names also changed. So there was no way to link them to old documents. Among them, economic operations formalized by Christian notaries, other than to make their former conditions explicit. Now we need to pause there. Do you see how difficult they made it to trace their lineage later on? They were forced to convert, then forced to change their names. So there was no way to connect them to the old documents. So let's go ahead and say it was a way to remove any rights they would have to their property later. You now have your name changed. We don't have anything on you on the records. And it allowed them to monitor them like they monitor us now. So for both minorities, though conversion was uncommon before 1391 for 2 reasons. First, because apart from sermonizing by preachers, it was not readily encouraged by the king or the cities and municipalities. And second, because it was usually implied, severing family ties and involved casting the converted individual outside the solidarity networks to which he, and less frequently she, had belonged. So before 1391, they were reluctant to do this because they would have been separating families. However, The massive conversions of Jews ended that status quo, though this was almost exclusively the case for Jews or the Yehudis, because it says Muslims would not be forcibly converted to Christianity until more than a century later, despite the outbreaks of violence against them. So for more than 100 years, they were doing this to our people, the Yehudis. You all, devils. One would imagine, therefore, that the identification of conversos should not present any difficulty, but that is not the case. The practice of explicitly identifying converts from Judaism quickly declined over time. By 1420, only a minority of notaries and clerks were specifying the former Jewish condition of individuals. So by that time, it's like, we don't need to classify them. So the last identification of a new Christian as such in Valencia's municipal documents dates from 1427, and some notaries abandoned this practice even sooner. After that, it could be easily assumed that with a long list of names and surnames spanning the first two generations of conversos, tracing their descendants would be straightforward, but a new problem arises. Some conversos were sponsored at baptism by the same Christian patron and adopted his or her name. So they had to have sponsors, and then took on the name of the European sponsor. This forced the abandonment of Jewish names, regardless of age, sex, or rank within the community, making it almost impossible to trace individuals before and after 1391. It says it is possible to know the Jewish names of some of those individuals because they sometimes appear along with the identifying adjectives like converso or new Christian in a handful of documents, especially during the first few years after the conversion. So that was another twist to make it even more difficult. Is it becoming clear to you now why we had no idea that we were the people? So we ask questions like, why do these people hate us so much? Why are we suffering so much? We seem to be doing the same things they're doing to get ahead. Well, now you know. Now you know. It says surnames are not always helpful either. Although they may seem a useful instrument to associate individuals with particular families, and though this association may often be correct, it is not always the case. The circumstances of the conversion and the mechanism of sponsorship itself meant that, listen, members of the same family did not usually bear the same last name. Now, how diabolical is that? Members of the same family didn't even have the same name because they had to take the name of the sponsor. So close relationships and solidarity between relatives, common in medieval societies, can be difficult to explain when analyzing converso communities if kinsmen did not share the same surname. Besides, they present other obstacles. The names were not only new to the conversos bearing them, so you have a new name that you have to try to remember, but they also belong to their old Christian contemporaries. Generally, they're sponsors at the baptism. Sponsorship and patronage in medieval times was a symbolic act that created an unequal bond between two people. But it was also a social act designed to reaffirm and enhance the social capital of the sponsor. It enhanced the social capital of the sponsor. It enhanced the social capital of the sponsor. His piety, proven by having given his name to an individual redeemed in the faith of Christ. Are you getting this? Do you see how all of this was put in place in Spain and Portugal? So think about what happened to our people when they got here. They took the name of the slave master, the last name. So you couldn't trace anything. You all, It says conversos adopted the names of their godfathers, proceeded with their lives and activities, and were initially identified as former Jews in documents. But over time, and given the decline of the above-mentioned scribal practice, distinguishing them has proven to be a difficult task, especially if their names came originally from regular artisans, merchants, or notaries. So they couldn't track them. They had no idea what the names were. There's a song by Tasha Cobb that comes to mind, You Know My Name. Yah kept a record family. They thought they got away with this. They didn't. He knows our name. Let's keep going. So this journal article, Reading Against the Grain, Readings of Substitution, Catholic Books as Inspiration for Judaism in Early Modern Iberia. So it says forced conversion produced a large number of converts, many or at least some of whom sought to continue to practice their former religion. For many crypto-Jews and crypto-Muslims, polemical literature was actually a source of knowledge about their old religion. They had to find out what their ancestors did by reading other literature, because everything they had, their ancestors had been burned. It says it was not unusual for Iberian New Christians lacking access to Jewish or Islamic books to make use of Catholic works, either to gather information about Judaism and Islam or to borrow from their expressions of spirituality and piety. With the newly insurmountable difficulty of accessing the sacred texts in the vernacular or in the common language that the people spoke, for many converts, polemical literature became an important source of knowledge about their old religion. I'm going to say their old ways and customs. So the author here says, I argue here that the Inquisition and the church in general was conscious. He's saying they knew of the dangers posed by the information included in written works, sermons, and sentences that condemned Judaism, Islam, Protestantism, or other forms of deviance or dissent from Catholic orthodoxy. They knew what the results would be. So they didn't have access to the sacred texts in the common language. And remember, they translated everything into Latin. So the common man had to rely on the Catholic priests to interpret everything for them. Now listen carefully to this. The church considered as dangerous polemical literature that could be used as a source for converts to learn about the religion of their fathers. In addition, those works included the arguments of other religions against Catholicism. Were the Inquisition and the Church sensitive to the dangers and unintended effects of polemical works? The answer is undoubtedly yes. Yes, they knew the dangers. They didn't care. So let's take a look at this from Deuteronomy 11:18 through 21. Therefore you shall lay up those words of mine in your heart. The Most High told our ancestors says, lay up these words of mine in your heart and in your soul, and bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall teach them to your children, speaking of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates, that your days and the days of your children may be multiplied in the land of which the Most High swore to your fathers to give them, like the days of the heavens above the earth. This is what he said to our ancestors, to get his words down in the heart and then teach it to your children. But you see that even if they were doing this, by this time, the enemy found a way to erase our heritage by separating the families. That's why they did it. Separating the young from the old, erasing the names, and trafficking our people to different regions, making sure they would not be sent to places where family would be. And even if they did, they had different names. They could have been sent to a plantation where the grandmother was there, but they didn't know. They had no way of knowing. They had no way of knowing. But our ancestors failed to follow after the laws and precepts long before we were scattered. Because this kind of stuff, believe it or not, was going on in the disciples' day. Yes, Matthew 23, 1 through 4 tells us that the scribes and Pharisees added countless laws of their own. They added things. Instead of making the people's load lighter, they made it heavier. Now, if the people had written Yah's laws on their hearts, they knew it. They would have known, like, this is not lining up. This is not lining up. But because our ancestors failed to do that, this is why we find ourselves in our condition today. And this is why we have to be led by the Ruach in these last days to rightly divide, because of everything that has happened. Those who are adamantly opposed to the New Testament, didn't they get their hands on the Old Testament as well? How else did we get insertions for the name of the Most High? How did we get those words, God, Lord, non-Hebraic names, etc.? So how can you tell people to stop reading the New Testament? It's because you can't see that Messiah is all throughout the Old and the New. They tweaked some things, but they didn't change everything. But that's why we need the Ruach, so that we can rightly divide. Because what was the Most High wanting us to get into our hearts and in our mind? His word. Who is the Word made flesh? He came as the last Adam, in a similar way to how the first Adam came. He came directly from the Father. So stop focusing on the human body that comes from the dust of the earth. All of us came that way. It's created from material that the Most High made during creation. Focus on what is in the vessel. He breathed the breath of life into Adam so that he could live. Adam didn't have scripture, something written that he was reading every day to see, okay, this is how I do this. This is how I do that. He breathed the breath of life. That force is the spirit of life that came out of the Father. What does the scripture say about where Messiah came from? He came out of the bosom of the Father. He came from him and manifested as a person. But the Father used the same material that we're housed in. This body is corruptible because of Adam's sin. It doesn't live forever. Adam was told that the soul that sinned would die, or he knew that if he would stray away from what the Most High said, he was going to die. Well, what does dying mean to him? He had no idea what that meant. He'd never experienced it before. This happened immediately in the spirit realm for Adam. But it was years later that this earthly body died. Messiah had to deal with the condition of the soul first when he came. He reconnected that which had been cut off, that which Adam had and lost. That was the assignment then. But not only that, he came to show us how we are to live at the higher level, family, once we're reconnected. Notice that he breathed on the disciples and then told them to go out and share this. What was that all about? You won't understand that unless you understand that it was always Abba Yah's intent to not only dwell among us, but to be in us. And this is why Messiah said that the Ruach would be sent and he would be in us. Well, where did he come from? He came from the bosom of the Father. And until you understand that there are various ways that the Father can manifest himself to us, then you are completely missing it, because you are not able to recognize his word and his spirit that was manifested all throughout the Old and New Testament. You foolishly think that because the Roman Catholic Church got its hands on our books and twisted some things for their own benefit, that it should all be thrown out. Or, well, just throw out the New Testament. No, the beauty of this is that he's waking us up in spite of everything they did. They tried to completely erase us, change our name, change the color. They presented a whole new people to the world as the true people. Does it change the fact that we still exist? Based on the world's definition, we don't look like the true people, or all of the breadcrumbs in Scripture pointing to who we are. The way to life is a narrow path, and few there are that finds it. The same is true for Yeshua. There are breadcrumbs all throughout Scripture pointing to him. So I get these comments. You need to stop reading the New Testament. You need to stop telling people about the New Testament because you leading them into idolatry. Just like the enemy whitewashed us, they whitewashed him. Just like they changed our name, they changed his. So for those who are saying throw away the New Testament, and some are basically saying throw it all away, those who are against us, telling people about the New Testament and about Yeshua, saying just forget it. Focus on the Old Testament. You need to see that they both go together. And I say renewed. But you have to discern truth by the Ruach about who he is, because the highest form of engagement is for the Father to speak to your spirit, not have you relying on words written on a paper. That's a lower form. Think about how he communicated with Adam initially. Think about how Abraham heard him when he was told to leave his countrymen and go to a land that he would be shown. Abraham was not following directions from a book. Think about how the prophetic words came to the prophets, or when you read passages that say the Spirit of Yah was upon him and such happened. They were moved by the Ruach and followed as they were led. This is what Messiah restored when he said we would be filled with the Ruach. That's what born again means. He reconnected something. Your spirit is awakened to receive things of the kingdom of heaven. Adam had this and he lost it. So folks who are simply relying on your own mind to rightly divide scripture or historical texts, you're going to have a hard time understanding it. Why are you trying to understand spiritual things with a natural mind? His words are spirit and they are life. This is what has been restored to us. Why do you think he said he will write his words in our hearts and mind in the last days? The tongue is a ready writer. I did several workshops on moving scripture from head knowledge to heart knowledge because it has to be in you. This is what he was trying to get our ancestors to learn. Because your heart is the soil for the soul. It's where things grow, and what grows there is based on what's planted there. The seed has to come from above. So yes, some of you are not rightly dividing. The seed is Yah's word. The seed is a person. The seed was given to the woman. It did not come through natural means. How do you explain Isaiah 9:6? Unto us a child is born, the son is given. And then he tells us his name. Zechariah 12:10. I'll pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplications. They shall look upon me whom they have pierced. Who else did that happen to? Did they pierce David? They will mourn for him as one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him. Who is that talking about? Genesis 3:15. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed, and it shall bruise your head, and you will bruise his heel. He's in Genesis 1. So when you say he does not exist, it's because you're not rightly dividing. Yah's word is presented as a person, a spirit. His power and authority and his word is manifested in the Old and New Testament. So again, for those who are telling people don't believe in that, throw it away, stop reading it, I'm telling you, you are missing it, because he's revealing these things unto us by his spirit, by the Ruach. And you have to understand that. You won't see him in the Old Testament if you don't understand these things. So, yeah, I know I've gotten a few folks irritated with me? Why do you keep going back to the New Testament? You know, yeah, I don't know what to say to you. You be on your way. But yeah, family, the Catholic Church, those who came into agreement against us, the confederation of folks, did their best to cut us off. They tried their best to erase us. But here's how we know that Scripture is true. We see how things are unfolding. We see that we are the witnesses that he was talking about in the Old Testament. We see it. We see specific things happening to the house of Judah based on Luke 21. We see it happening. We see the prophetic words of the Messiah about the Gentiles trampling underfoot the land. So we are the witnesses that those words are true. They tweaked some things. They tried to change some things. They tried to make themselves the church. But the Most High is doing a beautiful thing. He's causing us to wake up and realize that we are the people in spite of everything they did. I laugh. It's amazing to me that in spite of everything they did to try to cut us off, we still are managed to get our hands on a few resources telling us what the ancient people look like. In spite of everything they've done to present this new people to the world, it's not lining up. How is it that I just shared all of those sources with you, telling you how they pretty much erased our history, but those people over there can still trace their lineage? How is that possible? How is that possible? Tell me, how is that possible? If the scripture's saying we were going to be separated from our heritage, why weren't they separated from theirs? If it's telling us we would have the yokes of iron on our necks and taken into all these lands, why is it when you Google it and you find pictures, you never see them? Beauty with brains. It's amazing to me too. In spite of everything they did, we still messed around and found out who we are. It's only possible by the grace of the Most High. Deborah said it's not possible. No, it's not possible for them to be, because there are things, there are breadcrumbs there that we should be looking at. So for those who are saying, well, the Bible's not real, Scripture is not real, how is it that our lives are matching up, lining up perfectly with the things that are there? All of those things are coincidences? Come on now. Come on. The Most High, it's almost like, yeah, go ahead, take your best shot. Go ahead, do what you're going to do. Try to, erase them. But in the last days, they will remember themselves. Where will they remember themselves, Most High? In the lands where I scattered. Oh my gosh, if I wasn't sitting here, I'd get up and run. That is simply amazing to me. Brother Harold said he is worthy to be praised. We are the witnesses, family, that these things are true. The whole truth, so help me, y'all. It says we're a special chosen people. Yes, we are. Minister Gwinnett, you probably running around your house too, right? I'm telling you, if I wasn't sitting, I'd be running right now, because they gave it their best to try to erase us from everything so that we would not remember. And for a time we didn't, until the things that were written about us could be fulfilled. But we're waking up. And now it is vitally important for us to be filled with the Ruach. For those who are not, you're going to have a really hard time rightly dividing, because you cannot discern these things with your natural mind. You're not going to see him. You can't, you're not going to do it. He's revealing himself unto us. Ooh, you all. Ooh, I guess you can tell I'm full tonight. Mariah, a Confederate against Yah's people. We are waking up all over the world. Absolutely. Vikisha, we are the witnesses and the evidence of the witnesses. Yes, a crime was committed, and we are the evidence of that crime. So we should be rejoicing. I know we need to remain in a state of repentance for us and for the things that our ancestors have done. But there's joy also, family. There is joy when we see how these things are unfolding, when we see everything happening around the world. People who never wanted to admit certain things. Look, at first it's like, oh no, all of the ancient Israelites were pale-skinned people. Then it was, oh well, they may have been olive-colored people. And now they're saying, well, we know that some of them were a brown-colored people. They can't bring themselves to say black. But how did we go from they were all pale to now, well, some were a brown color? They've moved on from olive. What happened? Oh, my word. Oh, you all. Oh, my word. Oh, my goodness. Y'all. Yes, yes, yes. I am so full. I am so thankful. Thank you to all of you for the super chats. There are too many for me to name right now. I hope you understand. Just know that I appreciate you. I thank you. I pray the Most High's blessings upon you, that he will restore unto you sevenfold of everything that you have poured into this ministry. And for those of you who have been praying, I am just so thankful. I'm so thankful, because it is as important. It is as important. Minister Gwinnett, yes, we must repent and come back to Yah with our whole heart. Absolutely. Absolutely. Dawn says, Yahuwah is waving his hand a second time to recover his people. Just like he said, right? Is lining up just the way that he said. So how could it be false? He allowed them to go so far and no more. It's like, okay, here's the line in the sand. Don't cross that line. Charles says, go ahead and tell us how they survived thousands of years in a land that eat up non-melanated people. No kidding. And they had to deal with malaria and other things. So how'd they do it? How did they do it? Josephine, they were saying they were clear color. I guess so. Shaya, they'd rather die 1,000 deaths than to admit it's us. But didn't he say he would force them to bow? They're going to come bowing at our feet. He said that. After all of the finagling they did, erasing things, and yet in spite of it all, we can look at certain breadcrumbs and say, that's us. That's talking about us. Now we understand how all of these Christian nations prospered, created empires, and our people were forced to convert, and we were still the underdog. It's like, no, God of wood and stone. God of wood and stone. Oh my word. Y'all, this is exciting. Mariah, it's exciting. Wasn't the rapture supposed to have happened this past weekend? Oh, I didn't know that some folks were saying that. I guess I missed that one. Rose said they're doing the exact same thing today, banning books in public schools, orchestra. Yes, trying to do the same thing. We don't want anybody to know what we did to you. That's what they were doing back then. We don't want anybody to know what we did to you. So we're going to erase you. We're going to put all these laws in place, create all these canons. My. Eddie Smith, I'm being changed and realizing my identity. Thank you so much. I would not have gotten here without you. Trust me, it is all the Most High. I've been full of this almost all day. Well, it's been about a week. Some of these things just, as they drop in my spirit, it's like, oh my word, this is just so rich. When he dropped it in my spirit, this was months ago. He was saying, reading my word from a book, from written paper, that's a lower form. No, you need to be able to hear him in real time. Like how he was speaking to Moses, how he was speaking to Elijah. They were not relying on a book. The disciples were not relying on the New Testament. They had the Old Testament, but did they even know that? No, Messiah had to rebuke them on a number of things. It was like they were being retaught all over again. They had the basics. But once they were filled with the Spirit, they were getting things being dropped into their spirit. Go here, don't go there, do this. How did Peter know about Ananias and Sapphira? So don't be dismayed by what's written in the book. Ask him to write it in your heart and in your mind so that you know when he's speaking, regardless of what they've tweaked by adding Easter or whatever else they added to the New Testament. Ask him to write it in your heart so that you can rightly divide and discern what should be there, what shouldn't be there, what they inserted, what they didn't insert, so that you are led by the Ruach. That's the ultimate goal for us, to be led by his Ruach. This was a promise for us. That is for us. Raphael, Dr. Brown getting messed up. Oh my word, I watched that. I felt sorry for the man. I said, as I was watching it, I said, this is a slap down right here. I mean, Brother Dante took no prisoners. I was listening to it going, ooh, ouch. Oh my goodness. You all, that was a butt whooping. I mean, I would think you would just sit down and close your mouth after. But they can't admit the truth. They're too proudful. Their pride won't let them do it. It won't let them do it. So the Most High is going to force them to do it. They will do it. They will acknowledge. Win Walker says they will be forced to pay up. Absolutely, they will. Absolutely, they will. So family, don't get discouraged. And for those of you sending me messages about the New Testament, I'm telling you as the best way that I can, as nice as I can. You are not rightly dividing You are not rightly dividing. You go back to the Old Testament in those places where people worshiped what they called an angel that appeared to them, and it was allowed. But the angels, like the real angels, would say, no, don't worship me. Don't worship me. Who was that? Who was Moses interacting with? The Most High. The Most High is able to present himself to us in ways we can only imagine. We get caught up on these names. He has another name that it hasn't even been revealed yet. Oh, y'all, I'll probably go off on something else. I don't want to go there. There's just so much to unpack, so much to uncover. But I'm trying to tell you the best way that I can. You're not rightly dividing. If you're saying Messiah has not come or did not come, he came to deal with something specific the first time. And that's why the disciples were asking, are you going to restore the kingdom now? It wasn't, he had to do something else first. Judah, the house of Judah, had to go into captivity and be scattered. That had not taken place yet. So, yeah. All right, y'all. I think I shared enough. There's so much. I could go on and on and on, but there is so much. And we have folks that are my age, like, it's bedtime. It's past your bedtime. So we'll pick up next time. We're going to continue with Great Britain and then some of the other nations. Some of them I may be able to combine. But you all know it's on when we get to America, right? We got a lot to share about them because they took things to a whole new level. So, yes, but I needed you to see how the foundation was set in Spain and Portugal. A lot of the things that came after, it began there. And it gave them time to begin erasing us. But that's what the Confederate of Nations said they would do. Cut us off from being a nation so that people wouldn't even remember the name of Yasharel. And the Most High said, go ahead, take your best shot. But I have a plan. I'm going to speak to their heart. I'm going to speak to their mind. They're going to wake up in the land of their captivity. And they're going to remember themselves. Oh, y'all, I need to stop because, yes. My goodness. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining me for the session. I'm just so full of what the Most High is doing, how he's revealing his truths to us. Yeah, right about that tribe of Jesse. Yeah, and a lot of them experienced the same thing with the Saharan slave trade. They were doing the same thing to them, separating them, burning them out of their homes. There are several videos on YouTube about how they would go into Timbuktu and burn the books, and how some of the families were hiding the books, hiding them in their walls so that they couldn't get into it. And even recently, when it was discovered that some of those books survived, Al-Qaeda just happened to go in and started burning books and burning libraries. You all know who those folks are, right? Same people we're talking about. The same people we're talking about. That Confederacy of Nations. So even though they try to erase us, we are still here. Oh my word. Y'all, if I don't stop now, we might be here till 10:30. So we're going to wrap things up. Again, thank you, thank you, thank you to all of you for the super chats, the sticker. Thank you. We appreciate all that you do to support the ministry. Thank you all. I'm praying that you all will be encouraged in the Most High, and don't just look at what the enemy's doing. Look at what he is doing. We are his witnesses. We can look at those prophecies and see how those line up to what has happened to us, what is happening to us. So be of good cheer, be like David, and encourage yourself in the Most High, because he is doing a great work. He's doing a great work, family. Be blessed, family. Have the very best rest of the week. Take care.